And I don't want to be confronted by my future grandchild saying, why didn't you do something? Grandchild, obviously, it makes it even more obvious, you know.
The royal silence has finally been broken, and it happened in a way no one saw coming. After years of keeping quiet, King Charles made a shocking statement that surprised the royal family. His words didn't just stir up talk, they sent a wave of shock through the walls of Buckingham Palace. According to family members, this wasn't just a random outburst. They believe it's the result of years of hidden anger, old wounds, and feelings that were never dealt with. Who exactly is he talking about? And what led the king to speak out now, after years of royal restraint? Join us as we uncover the story behind King Charles's emotional outburst, the truth about his early ties with Diana, and why the past refuses to stay buried. Cracks in the crown. For years, the royal family managed to keep a tight lid on their troubles, but now everything is starting to fall apart. In a moment that surprised everyone, King Charles broke his silence and said something that sent shockwaves through the palace halls. His words were heavy with emotion, raised eyebrows, and left many wondering what lies beneath the royal image. Now that long-held truths are coming to light, the once solid image of unity at the palace is beginning to crumble. Things didn't fall apart overnight. For a while, everything looked normal. The royal family stayed in the spotlight, smiling at events and doing what was expected. But in the background, different choices were being made, and small moments that did not seem important would later change everything. Something had already started long before the headlines and public drama, and that's where the real story begins. The beginning of the story is different from what most people think. While many believe the first meeting happened at a party hosted by an older sister, the truth is, it took place in a much simpler way. At that time, she was just 16, quiet and unsure, still growing into herself. He was already much older and well known in the public eye. That first meeting seemed small, but it marked the start of something bigger. He tried to ignore those early feelings and kept seeing Sarah like nothing had happened. Not long after, the two went on a ski trip that caught the media's eye. The press wasted no time showing off smiling photos of them together, calling them the perfect match and even hinting at a royal wedding. But behind the smiles, things were not as perfect as they seemed. At one of Sarah's gatherings, something unexpected happened. Charles found himself alone with Diana, and at that moment, everything started to shift. It was a small moment, easy to miss, but it quietly began something that would change their lives. What happened that night would later shape a story the world would never forget. How could such a quiet start lead to a life remembered and a future lost too soon? A glance that became more. During that time away from the crowd, Diana found herself walking alone with Charles through the gallery in her home. Their conversation felt easy, natural, and surprisingly personal. Her warmth and excitement left a strong mark on him, and though he was still seeing Sarah, something about Diana stayed on his mind. She was young and unsure, yet full of life, and while she was flattered by his attention, it also left her a little unsure of what to make of it. After all, he was not only older but already deeply connected to her sister, which made everything feel off-limits. But what no one saw coming happened next. Sarah, who had once appeared happy and close to Charles, shocked the public by saying she had no romantic interest in him at all. In a bold magazine interview, she openly said she had no plans to marry into the royal family. This came as a surprise to many, especially because just weeks before, she and Charles had looked like a couple, heading toward an engagement. She later married someone else and quietly stepped out of the royal picture, leaving behind a space that Charles hadn't expected to open up. With Sarah out of the picture, Charles's focus shifted. Diana, who had once been just a teenager in the background, began to stand out in a new way, even though there were clear reasons to worry, especially the wide age gap and her lack of royal experience. Charles chose to follow his interest. They began to see more of each other, and the royal family, always aware of how things looked to the public, kept a close watch. The romance quickly moved forward. Soon, the world was watching their grand wedding with wonder.
I, Diana Frances, take thee, Philip Charles Walter George, To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
Diana looked like a dream in her gown, and many believed they were watching the beginning of a true fairy tale.
That bore some relationship to what I meant to say. Pleasure for me to come to Wales and to its capital, Cardiff.
But behind all the smiles and pageantry, something was already off. Before the wedding, the couple sat down for a public interview that many people watched closely. When the question of love came up, she answered that she was in love, but his reply was cold and hesitant, as if he wasn't entirely sure. That moment raised quiet doubts, and for the first time, people began to question whether this royal match was as perfect as it seemed. That small moment during the interview stayed with her, feeding a worry she couldn't shake. Deep down, she had started to wonder if his heart was truly hers. What happens when doubts turn into proof just days before saying, "I do"? Love, lies, and leaks. Just days before the wedding, a troubling discovery shook everything Diana believed to be true. She found out that Charles had bought a gift, not for her, but for Camilla, the woman he had once loved. The news hit her hard, and for a brief moment, she thought about walking away from it all. But with pressure from her family and the eyes of the world watching, she pushed those feelings aside and went ahead with the ceremony. On the surface, the wedding was a grand success, glamorous, regal, and unforgettable. But beneath the lace and ceremony, Diana carried a heavy truth, and the truth would eventually shape the early days of her royal life. From that moment on, her life changed. Royal duties, constant attention, and the need to always look perfect became her new normal, and it weighed heavily on her. Though Charles had affection for Diana, their differences became harder to ignore. They were not well matched, and his heart still seemed tied to Camilla, a bond Diana could feel but couldn't fix. As time went on, the space between them grew wider. Charles became more distant, and rumors of the affair with Camilla refused to fade away. She confronted Camilla face to face, asking her to step back, but nothing changed. The tension in the marriage only got worse, and the media couldn't get enough of the drama. Then came the moment that changed everything. A private phone call between Charles and Camilla was leaked to the public, and its contents left no room for doubt. Their closeness, their words, and the emotional connection exposed a truth many had already suspected. The scandal exploded across news outlets, and Diana was left deeply hurt by what had now been confirmed. Charles later admitted to the affair, and soon after, Diana shared her own truth in a powerful interview.
Yes, but that's taking time because I don't want to dive into something. Nothing would upset me more than...
She spoke of the pain of living in a marriage that always had a third person in it. What started with smiles and grand promises slowly turned into something painful. Diana had believed that having children would bring them closer, but the distance between them only grew. Charles's feelings for Camilla never truly went away, and that made it hard for their marriage to ever feel whole. Living in the palace did not bring comfort. There were endless royal events, flashing cameras, and no space to deal with personal pain. Most of the time, Diana carried the weight by herself, and the harder she tried to keep the family together, the more things seemed to fall apart. Diana tried to hold on, hoping things would get better, but the silence in her marriage grew louder each day. Her sadness became harder to hide, even behind the careful smiles and public waves. What happens when a private heartbreak becomes a public spectacle for the whole world to see? Secrets, lies, and cameras. Diana's sadness didn't stay private for long. Her forced smiles and tired eyes at royal events became the talk of the town. Reporters circled like vultures, picking apart everything she wore, said, or did. Gossip started to spread like wildfire. Was the perfect royal marriage already falling apart? The tabloids had a field day, printing wild headlines about betrayal and heartbreak. And as the rumors grew louder, the world watched closely, waiting for the palace to crack under the weight of its own secrets. The pressure became too much for the royal family to hide. In a shocking move, Charles went on TV and admitted he had been unfaithful to Diana. People around the world were stunned as the picture of him as a faithful prince was destroyed in one moment. Diana, feeling embarrassed and deeply hurt, had to deal with this while photographers constantly took her picture. What should have been a private matter between a husband and wife became news everywhere. To many, Diana was the princess who was never truly loved. Some blamed Charles for never letting go of Camilla, while others said the royal family forced them into a marriage that was doomed from the start. Diana's pain was no longer a secret. She spoke honestly about feeling unwanted and struggling with bulimia, which had taken hold during the darkest years of her marriage. Instead of hiding behind a royal mask, she let the world see her pain, and people loved her even more for it. By 1992, when they officially separated, their fairy tale marriage was already over. After their divorce became final in 1996, Diana started a new life. She changed her pain into something meaningful. Instead of hiding away, she came forward to help sick people, poor people, and those everyone else had forgotten. She walked through dangerous areas with landmines, hugged people with HIV, and spoke up for people that others ignored. In the end, people don't remember Diana because she was a princess. They remember her because of her kindness. Even after the divorce, Diana chose to lead with compassion instead of anger. She found purpose in helping others, turning her pain into something powerful. But how does the world move on when someone so full of light is suddenly gone? Diana's light still burns. When Diana passed away in 1997, people around the world felt incredibly sad. Many felt like they had lost someone close to them. Her absence created a deep sadness that affected people of all ages in many countries. But her memory stayed strong. Her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, honored her by doing the kind of work she loved most. Through charities, community work, and public service, they continued her mission to help people who were forgotten and those who couldn't speak up for themselves. This kept her memory alive in ways that went far beyond what was expected of the royal family. After this, the media entered a frenzy unlike anything seen before. Her face was on every front page, and her story dominated headlines for months. However, as the world grieved, another chapter quietly opened for Charles. It was not a new story, but one he was building quietly with Camilla. Before becoming tied to Charles, Camilla had lived a different life. In the late 1960s, she met Andrew Parker Bowles, a respected military officer, through his younger brother. Camilla's early relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles wasn't easy. They were together on and off for years, with breaks and changing feelings. They didn't get married just because of love. There was also pressure from others. Both came from important families in high society who had strong expectations. At one point, their engagement was announced in public before they had fully agreed to it, which left Andrew feeling he had to go through with it. They got married in summer, 1973, and soon had two children, Tom and Laura. But things did not last. After more than 2 decades of marriage, time and strain took their toll. By the early 1990s, the cracks in their passionless marriage were showing. In December 1994, they began the divorce process, and just a few months later, the marriage was officially over. Andrew eventually remarried and moved on, closing that chapter for good. For Camilla, however, this ending was the beginning of a path that would lead her back to the royal circle and back into the heart of the man who had never truly let her go. As one royal chapter closed, another quietly began to unfold. While the world focused on the breakup, something old was slowly being renewed behind the scenes. Could the end of one love story open the door for a second chance? Old flame and new crown. Before Camilla became famous, she met Prince Charles in 1971. They had both been part of the same wealthy social groups for years, but it was their mutual friend, Lucia Santa Cruz, who finally introduced them. They didn't first meet at a polo match, as many people think, but at a friend's house. They liked each other right away. They both enjoyed outdoor activities, horses, and came from similar backgrounds, which helped them become close quickly. Soon, people saw them together at important events and family gatherings, and they became a well-known pair among the upper class. But their growing relationship hit a turning point in early 1973. Charles was called to serve in the Royal Navy, and the long absence placed strain on what they had built. By the time he returned, Camilla had moved on and married her ex-husband. Even though their romantic relationship ended, they never fully let go of each other. Some believed the affair started again in 1980, but others said it never actually stopped. Many insiders gossiped that Camilla had always had a strong hold on Charles, even during his marriage. While Diana took the public spotlight, Camilla stayed in the background, but her influence never faded. As the rumors became louder, the public turned on her, blaming her for the problems between the couple. The backlash was harsh, and for a while, she disappeared from view. But even though she disappeared and was out of sight, the bond between her and Charles only grew deeper, and no amount of public outrage could break what had always been there. By 2005, the bond could no longer stay hidden. Clarence House announced their engagement, marking the start of a new royal chapter. Because of Charles's role as future head of the Church of England, their union raised many questions, especially since Camilla had been married before. Still, they received approval from the Queen, the government, and the Church, and the couple married in a quiet civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. With the vows exchanged, Camilla was officially given a new title, and her place beside the future king was finally sealed. Their wedding marked the end of years of waiting, judgment, and second chances finally realized. It was a turning point not just for them, but for the monarchy itself. But what happens when the woman once seen as an outsider steps into the role of queen? Crowned after the storm. After Queen Elizabeth passed away on September 8, 2022, the royal family entered a new phase. Charles became king, and Camilla received the title of Queen Consort. At first, people referred to her as Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, to avoid confusion with the late Queen. The title showed that she would support King Charles in his role without replacing his mother. As time went on, the public slowly got used to seeing Camilla in this new position. Even though the public seemed to think that she had it easy, Camilla's path was not an easy one. For many years, people were unsure about Camilla and often criticized her, but over time her image slowly started to change. Instead of only seeing her as someone from Charles's past, the public began to notice her presence and support through difficult times. She continued to attend royal events, take part in charity work, and quietly stand by the king. These moments helped shift how people saw her. The role that once brought her so much criticism eventually became something more accepted.
We cannot help but think of those for whom the devastating effects of conflict.
And she quietly found her place in the royal family. To understand how Charles remained firm in making Camilla his queen, even when it stirred public debate, it's important to look back at how he was shaped from the start. Born on November 14, 1948, Charles's life was already chosen for him. As the firstborn child of Queen Elizabeth II, he was always expected to become king. When his mother took the throne in 1952, the spotlight turned toward him. From that moment, his every move became news. While most children could make mistakes and grow in private, Charles had to do it under the constant watch of cameras and reporters. He lived in palaces, traveled the world, and attended formal events, even as a young boy. But all the wealth came with strict rules and pressure. He couldn't run free or make friends easily, because everything he did was judged by the public. Even playtime had limits, and he quickly learned to smile politely, shake hands properly, and speak carefully. Every moment of his childhood reminded him that he was not like other boys. Charles knew he had only one purpose. He was raised to wear the crown, and from early on, that responsibility shaped every part of his life. From the outside, it looked like a life of privilege, but behind palace walls, it was often cold and lonely. Charles had everything except the freedom to just be himself. How does a young boy carry the weight of a crown before he's even grown? A prince under pressure. Growing up, Charles experienced moments of deep loneliness. His family did not often show affection, and even though he was cared for, warmth and closeness were missing. His parents, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, were very dedicated to their royal duties and spent much of their time traveling across the world. Charles understood their responsibilities, but their absence made him feel distant from them. His father, known for his strong and disciplined nature, expected Charles to be tough, but Charles had a softer personality. This difference made it hard for them to connect, and Charles often felt he had to hide his true self to meet his father's expectations. School life added more challenges. Unlike some royals before him, Charles did not stay within palace walls for his education. He was sent to boarding schools, including the tough and demanding Gordonstoun in Scotland. The school's focus on endurance and discipline did not suit him, and he found the environment harsh and lonely. While his father had thrived there, Charles struggled to feel at ease. Still, he had a deep interest in learning. He loved subjects like history, the arts, and nature, and he often turned to painting, music, and reading as ways to express himself. Whenever he had the chance, Charles spent time outdoors, where he felt most at peace. Being outside allowed him to escape the weight of royal expectations, even if only for a little while. These quiet moments helped him stay grounded. He enjoyed creative activities because they gave him space to be himself, something he didn't always feel free to do in public. The pressure to behave a certain way, especially in front of the media, was constant, and that pressure shaped much of how he carried himself. Palace insiders have long hinted at the deep resentment Charles held during his marriage to Diana. Those close to the royal household say he often complained about her behavior behind the scenes, describing her as moody, difficult, and unwilling to play the role expected of a future queen. He reportedly felt that she treated him with little respect in private, even while winning the public's heart. Over time, his frustration grew, and according to those familiar with the tension, his feelings became impossible to hide. Behind closed doors, things were far from the fairy tale the world believed. Did Charles marry for duty, for love, or something in between? Can the royal family ever truly recover from the shadows of the past? And should King Charles have waited longer before making Camilla his wife? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.